with that, I guess we'll start with introductions, and just to facilitate this, I'm going to work down a list that I put together as people had RSVP'd, and so I'll just call on you if I could, and if you would unmute yourself and introduce yourself and who you're with, and we'll just work down that way. And so the first person on my list is Claire Ward with NOAANET.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Claire Ward, Marketing and Communication Manager with NOAANET. That's Northwest Open Access Network. We deploy telecommunications networks and are looking to see if there's a way we can support community deployment of EV charging stations that can also serve as hotspots. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
Awesome. Sarah Crouch, Jefferson Transit.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody here. My name's Sarah Crouch. I'm the finance manager at Jefferson Transit.
Thank you, Sarah. Carrie Merrill.
Hi, I'm here with my husband, Jonas. We just bought the Beaver grocery store out here in Beaver, and we are going to be opening soon. And we were invited to attend this meeting, so we're here.
And Carrie, Lindsay had gotten in touch with me. So the Beaver grocery store, and Beaver is in between, and pardon my naivete, is in between Port Angeles and Forks.
Correct.
Do I understand that right? Terrific.
Yes.
Excellent. And congratulations on the store, and good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if she's on. Is Vicki Cummings on? She wasn't sure she could be here, but how about Zaina Dennis, Grays Harbor Council of Governments?
Hi, yes, Vicki, I don't think was able to get on this morning, but I am Zaina Dennis, and I'm the Grays Harbor Council of Governments.
Thank you. I don't see Ted. I don't see Ted Jackson on yet, so we'll come back. Mike Doherty, I see you on there.
Good morning. So I'm a retired Clown County Commissioner, and for several years I've been working with a group out of Port Townsend who's very interested in forming an electric vehicle loop around the peninsula. There have been a few increments of that built with some money through the Park Service, a certain manufacturer of automobiles. So there's some sites at Lake Crescent Lodge, Lake Quinault, Clay Lock, Saldick Hot Springs. So there's some parts of it, and then south down the canal, there's some parts. Generally, the casino tribes have been helpful. So that's sort of been our concept to help try to promote as a group of citizens. And thanks for your work.
Yeah, great. Thank you for what you've done too, and for being here. Mara Mikulski.
Good morning, Mayor Matulski. I'm a contract lobbyist, just interested in the topic. I work with the Ho tribe out on the peninsula, and also NOAANET, and I see Claire on the line. So thanks for letting me join this morning.
It's great to have you here. I'm Catherine Schaefer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Schaefer, and I'm a policy analyst for the Kitsap County Board of County Commissioners. And thank you for putting this on. I'm really excited for the information that you'll be able to share with us.
Oh, we're glad to have you here. I don't see Trish. How about Jeff Shea?
Hi, my name is Jeff Shea. I'm with Kitsap County. I'm the county traffic engineer.
Fantastic. Angela Bennick.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I am the telecom director for Kitsap PUD, but working with the county to look at what we can do for smart poles with the EV charging stations.
Neat. Keith Swearingen. Swearingen. Sorry if I'm butchering everybody's names.
Yes, I'm Keith Swearingen. I'll get this camera turned on for a second. I'm the equipment services manager here at the county, in charge of buying all the vehicles and equipment here, and with my ears wide open, seeing what's going on. We have already started moving into the EV world, and interested in seeing what's going to be happening through this area.
Thank you for coming today. Melissa Moore.
Hi, I'm also with Kitsap County in Public Works and Transportation Planning.
Thank you. Anne Soul.
Hi there. I'm with City of Sequim, and I'm the resource manager in Public Works. But transportation and energy is a peripheral part of what I mostly do. However, it's really important to Sequim to have more charging stations, and a fast charger would be great. So we are working with, been working with PUD pretty closely on opportunities there. In fact, we partnered with them to get the first public charging stations in Sequim that opened, boy, a year and a half ago now.
Yeah, and I will just say, Anne has just been a fountain of information for me as my own, is trying to collect information, which we'll talk about shortly. Matthew Potts.
Morning, this is Matt. I work at the WashDOT Olympic Region Multimodal Planning, and so our area covers the Peninsula area, put it that way. So just here to listen in to see what we have to say about what Tanya really has to say about the WashDOT perspective. Thanks.
Sure. Matthias, I'm sorry, I don't know.
I usually say Matthias, but yeah, I'm Matthias Jarvagren with the Clallam County PUD, where I'm responsible for our energy efficiency efforts. And since I work generally with our customers, I tend to get pulled in for like sort of special projects like this would be.
Great. Tammy Rupert.
Hi. If I can get my. I'm Tammy Rupert. I'm the general manager for Jefferson Transit here in Port Townsend, and we've got a few projects coming up, and we're very interested in this subject as well. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah. And I should also say Tammy is also secretary of the PRTPO Executive Board. Sherry Jankowski. Sherry, are you on the call right now? Okay, we'll come back. She might have had to step away. I saw Will O'Donnell.
I'm Will O'Donnell from Jefferson County PUD. I'm the communications director and informal grant writer. And we've already partnered on one grant with Energy Northwest for charging stations in our county. That one didn't get funded, at least not for our area, and we're looking for more.
Wendy Clark-Getson.
Hi, I'm Wendy Clark-Getson. I'm here from Jefferson County Public Works, and I work with Cindy Jane with the Jefferson County Climate Action Committee.
Kevin Street.
Hi, Kevin Street. I'm manager at Jefferson County PUD, and we're here to gather more information. Thank you.
Sure. Laura, where did Laura go? There we are. Hey, Laura.
Hi there, Sarah. Hi, I'm Laura Parsons. I'm with the City of Port Townsend. I'm a civil engineer, manage a number of our larger construction projects, and I'm here excited to learn what the opportunities are. Just, yeah, love this topic and can't wait to apply for grants.
I see Arnie Backer with Port of Bremerton. Looks like you've logged on.
Yeah, I did just now. Thank you. I'm Arne Bacher. I'm Director of Business Development for the Port of Bremerton, and as well, I'm here to get more information and hopefully in the future apply for grants for this. We do have a couple of projects that we're actually want to put the infrastructure in place for EV charging stations.
Have I missed anyone besides besides Tanya and Mike? Have I missed anybody from our local or from our local communities? Okay, and Mike, how about you want to do your introduction?
Sure, thanks. I'm Mike Hewson. I lead the electromobility practice here at DKS Associates. We're an employee-owned transportation engineering and planning firm based in Portland, Oregon, but I'm based here in Seattle, Washington. And we've been working with Thera on this project and a lot of other projects. Our goal is to, expand electromobility and provide advice on charging infrastructure planning and design.
And he's been super helpful, as I think you'll hear very shortly if you haven't worked with him. And Tanya, do you want to your introductions as well, please?
Sure. Hi, my name is Tonya Buell, and I'm with the Washington State Department of Transportation. I work in our Innovative Partnerships office and been working on electric vehicle charging since about a decade, and was one of the co-creators of the West Coast Electric Highway network of charging along the I-5 corridor and other travel corridors. And I managed the pilot program that we did and have been working to get more funding from the legislature for expanding the state's network of charging infrastructure, and I'll be talking about that today. Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you for making the time to join us on such short notice. I'm going to take just a really quick minute to let you all know just a little bit about sort of the background of this and even who we are. For a lot of you, you may not have heard of PRTPO. Peninsula, it's PRTPO is short for Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization. It's a state designated RTPO, been around since 1990, but on July 1st, 2019, was sort of reconstituted as sort of an independent entity separate from being managed by WashDOT. So has really just sort of come into its own as a self-governing organization in the last 2 years. The region has a long-range transportation plan, and one of the things that came up out of that planning process was the need to increase the sort of the readiness of the Olympic and Kitsap Peninsulas for electric vehicles. And so the executive board, who I report to, identified a small amount of money that we could use this biennium to hire Mike and help us start laying a foundation for what that might mean for this region. PRTPO itself is a very tiny organization with very limited resources. And so in working with Mike, a lot of you have heard from me trying to collect information about electric vehicle resources, policies, plans, forecasts that have already been done. And as I was working with Mike, as we were working together to put that to start assembling that, the opportunity came up to talk about this upcoming grant program. And to all of you who responded on such very, very short notice, thank you. Both to Mike and Tanya for making this happen in this time period, and the rest of you to carve out the time this morning. And so, so that's how this came to be. This is PRTPO's effort to try to advance this work that a lot of you are doing and have been doing for years. I want to be really clear that PRTPO itself is not looking to develop a grant application. We're not really in a position to do that, but we can help with coordination and information gathering and letters of support and things like this. So certainly after this is over, if any of you want more information, those of you who are just learning about PRTPO, want more information on the organization or what we do or anything like that, please get in touch with me. We have an information list, and those of you who know me know that I'm happy to talk for a very long time about what we do, but I won't do that this morning. So what we're going to do over the next little bit of time is get some orientation into this program and into what all comes together. I'll try to help facilitate the second part of the meeting in the discussion that you all will have. Know that at the end of this, I don't know exactly yet what will come out of this, but we're looking for opportunities for you all to make connections. We're listening for strategies that seem to have legs and where we can figure out how to put together these really compelling projects. And in whatever way that I can help, I will, but really this is about what you all take from it and can do with it. And so that's sort of my background here. And unless there are any questions on PRTPO specifically or how we got here, we'll move on. I did see that Rachel Anderson has also been able to join us. Rachel, did you want to do a quick introduction before we get started?
Yeah, sure. Sorry about the dishwasher in the background if you end up hearing that. My name's Rachel Anderson. I was appointed to Sequim City Council in February and am part of the PRTPO board, right? So learning all kinds of things and feeling definitely out of my element. But wonderful to be with everyone here today. So thank you so much, Sarah.
It's great to have you here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Tanya, to give us an orientation, get us sort of understanding what this program is, we think it's going to look like when it comes out, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, excellent. So I put together some PowerPoint slides that I would like to share, and if you can give me permissions, I would.
You should just be set up to, you're looking for a green share screen.
Okay.
It should be probably down near the bottom, really bright.
Oh, I see it. Okay. Okay, share.
You got it.
Okay, all right. Let me move it over here if I can. Okay, so pardon me, I'm not going to be looking at you, but I'll be thinking of you when I'm presenting this. So again, my name is Tonya Buell, and I first want to start out by saying that this is one of the early presentations on our upcoming application cycle for the next round of grant funding. We're in the process of hiring a grant manager that will actually oversee this. And so things will be finalized after that person is on board. And I'll be giving you more of a general idea of what's expected and what you can get to work on now, because the more prepared you are now, when funding opportunities come up, you'll be ready. So I want to start by saying that in Washington State, we're actually, for the past 10 years, we've been in the top 3 states for EV market share. We have a lot of support from our Secretary of Transportation, Roger Millar, and our Governor Inslee, really to electrify everything. So we're electrifying our ferry fleet, putting in ferry fleet charging at some of our terminals. We are electrifying our WashDOT's fleet of vehicles, passenger fleet now, and as more and more electric vehicles come on the market, we'll be expanding that. We have a grant program. I heard some folks from transit agencies online. So we have a green transportation program to help transit agencies with transitioning to electric buses. We're working on all kinds of things, and we partner really closely with our sister agencies, the Department of Commerce Energy Office. And that agency also has transportation electrification grants. And then we partner with the Department of Ecology that's managing the Volkswagen settlement funds. And we're keeping a close eye on federal funds that should be distributed, not sure how yet, but for the new administration's goal of 500,000 charging ports across the nation. So a lot of funding opportunities coming up. So ZEVIP is what I'm going to be focusing on today. But just know that if you have plans in place for electrifying a portion or the entire US 101 corridor, that that you'll be ready when these grant opportunities come up. So no matter what, I think it's really great. Thank you, Thera, for pulling together this group. You have really done a great job of making sure you have the right people at the table, and you might even want to expand that, but having potential host sites online, utilities. The utilities are critical to the success of this program. And you've got planners, you've got all kinds of folks on here. So this year off to a really great start. And this is what I'll be talking about today. This was, I didn't have a whole lot of notice, so I've kind of pieced together some things. Hopefully I got this pretty updated, but I'm going to kind of give you a background on where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. I'll talk about the ZEVIP grant funding opportunity, which is what we're focused on today, some of the requirements, and more information about the grants and how it's changed from the first pilot. So just a quick overview. Our goal really is for electric vehicle drivers to have a unique driving experience where they can get where they need to go. So if they're in Seattle and they want to go to the Olympic National Park, that they should be able to find charging along the way and perhaps even in the park. In about 50-mile increments is our target. And as you can see on this map, we work really closely with Oregon and California and British Columbia. The 101 corridor ends at the Washington-Oregon state line. These are completed corridors where there are at least charging every 50 miles. And so, you know, we want to be able to complete that corridor in Washington someday. And so maybe you guys can help make that happen. And one thing people don't realize is that the West Coast Electric Highway charging network in Washington and these other West Coast states is really a tapestry of different funding sources and different projects. It's not one big project with one funding source. It's a vision for having charging so people can get where they need to go, and any funding that we can get for that purpose is great. The original West Coast Electric Highway was actually installed in 2012 with Federal Recovery Act funding. And we have 12 of those stations in Washington and 44 in Oregon and a bazillion in California now. And so we've learned a lot of lessons over the years. Just in the Pacific Northwest, we worked with a lot of partners. We've been sharing our experience. The West Coast Electric Highway was the nation's first multi-state, most robust electric vehicle corridor in the nation. And now it seems like all the states are now doing corridor charging. So we've been able to lead on this. And of course, when you are an early adopter, you do learn a lot of lessons, and we have. And I'll talk a little bit about those. I knew there were going to be some planners on today, so I just wanted to highlight some of the big plans that have been done. Back in 2010, the Department of Commerce and the Puget Sound Regional Council put together really a great guidebook for public agencies, local governments with model ordinances and all kinds of things. And then in 2011, we didn't even really know what electric vehicle charging stations were going to look like. So we thought that they'd have these big, beautiful solar canopies, battery storage, all kinds of stuff. But so we were just using drawings at that time. But then in 2012, we got the corridor complete, so someone could drive from British Columbia, Canada, up from Bellingham all the way to Portland, and find charging all along the way. And those were for the early cars, the Nissan Leafs and Kia Souls, and those that use the Chatamo connector. And interesting, we did a study with INL, the Idaho National Labs, and as we put in each charging location, they could see where people were driving. And when you put a station out, it just expands EV drivers' ability to get around. And it was remarkable to see how people started traveling longer distances, not being tethered to their local community. And so it's really expanded. WashDOT put together an action plan for 2015 to 2020. Our goal was to get 50,000 EVs on our roads by 2020, and we accomplished that in 2019 using a lot of different things, including having EV charging available for the public, but also all the excellent incentives for purchasing electric vehicles and, you know, things like building code improvements. So, and in the early days, when we were developing the grant program, we did a lot of stakeholder outreach, and we actually had giant maps that people stuck pins in, and that's how we came up with a list of priority corridors. So in 2017, we did our first grant program. It was a pilot program. We only had $1 million, but we were able to leverage that $1 million to match it with $1.5 million in partner funding, for a total of $2.5 million. And that increased the number of stations by 15. So 6 along the I-5 corridor, and then 9 in Eastern Washington. So the investment with our grant program made it possible for people driving electric vehicles for the first time, except for Teslas. Teslas can pretty much drive anywhere, but to get from Seattle to the Tri-Cities, or from the west side to the east side. So it opened up new roadways, and our legislature was really pleased with that, which is why they made the program permanent and provided more funding. These are some of the stations along I-5. If it helps you visualize what this could look like. We have electric vehicle charging at all kinds of locations along I-5, at Whole Foods, at the SeaTac cell phone parking lot, LeMay, America's Car Museum. If you're driving along I-5, you can see that, and some other locations. And with this program, nonprofits and government agencies must be the lead applicant, and then have private sector partners. So for this, fourth was the private, was the lead applicant, and then EVgo was the equipment and service provider. And then in Eastern Washington, someone mentioned Northwest Energy, and they were successful in securing one of the grants and putting in 9 charging locations. And they're at all different types of places as well, from fueling locations to city property, to some key locations where the public likes to go. For example, there's one on Main Street, there's one at a Starbucks that has the solar canopy, which is pretty cool. And then in Clayella, the charging is actually at the same location as the Tesla row of chargers. So you can get very creative on the locations, and I'm thinking of 101, which, you know, we'll talk about what kinds of sites are important. Signage, of course, is very important. Although people have apps that tell them where the charging is around them, we want to make sure that everybody knows that charging is available. So, and Washington State actually just updated some of this. So this is one of the slides that needs to be updated. But the signage stands, the federal highways has approved use of this alternative sign, which started in Washington, Oregon. Okay, so filling gaps. Look at that big red line right around the Highway 101. So this slide shows, it was an early slide, early map showing where some key stakeholders at the state, WashDOT, Commerce, Ecology, and others thought there are gaps, and where we could see that there was no charging. So we've taken that and actually worked with the University of Washington on a charge eval tool where you can actually do a simulation and see what kind of where you might put charging stations and compare different sites. And there's a link to that page there as well. And so on this, the thicker the line, the more the charging is needed because of several different inputs, including average daily traffic, how many origin destination information from INRIX, and a bunch of different things. So 101 doesn't show up as high on there. There is a line all the way around, but of course there aren't as many people driving on the 101 corridor as you know, I-5 and I-90 and some of the other routes. But it's still very important. It's shown up time and time again as a place where EV drivers want to see more charging. And Washington's effort, as I mentioned, we had the first electric vehicle corridor back in 2012, and now that's the goal for the whole country. And there are other corridors now that have been designated. I think ours is still the most robust and most consistent. And then another funding source is Electrify America as part of the Volkswagen settlement. A portion of the settlement went to states like Department of Ecology to determine how those funds would be invested, but $2 billion is used by Electrify America to install electric vehicle charging nationwide. 800 million is for California, and then 1.2 billion for the rest of the country. And they get to decide where the charging is. They could put all of it in Florida. So we've been submitting proposals to Electrify America for 3 rounds now, 3 out of 4 rounds. And we've had 101 as a key location for EV tourism. And they have agreed to put in charging along the 101 on the eastern part. And I know they've put it in Olympia. I think I saw maybe Hoodsport area as a potential location. I don't know the status of it, but I'll try to find out in the coming weeks. This is more about coordination among all the states, but I know you're most focused on the Olympic Peninsula. And you know, this industry is just exploding right now. For the first time ever, you're probably seeing commercials and hearing more and more about electric vehicles. And in the next couple of years, there should be 100 different makes and models available. There have been announcements from for the Ford F-150 is going electric, the Lightning truck. So there's going to be all different sizes of battery, different types, SUVs, pickup trucks, you know, sports cars, all kinds of vehicles. And I think more and more people are going to be expecting to be able to use those just like they would a gas car and go wherever they want. And I know they want to go visit the Olympic Peninsula. So things are changing really fast, and that's one of the reasons we're still determining what the minimum number of electric vehicle fast chargers are required per location. I think it will vary from area to area, but at least 2 DC fast chargers with at least 1 CHAdeMO connector and at least 1 combo charger connector. Okay, so that was all background. Let me do a time check. Okay, I think I'm okay. So as I mentioned earlier, to be eligible to be the lead applicant, you need to be a public agency or a nonprofit. And this program was developed to encourage private sector investment in EV charging. The legislature, the Joint Transportation Committee did a full study a few years back that showed that without state investment, the private sector is not just going to come in and put in the charging, not necessarily where we want. They might in you know, downtown Seattle or places where they're expecting a lot of usage and might be able to see a return on investment in 5 or 10 years, but locations in more rural areas or tourist areas need that government incentive. So that's why we have the grant programs, and that's why our grant application is really the projects are really evaluated on the partnerships that are developed. That's why it's called the partnerships program. It's about you know, leveraging the funding that we have to get the most chargers in the best locations that we can. So so it's really important that all the partners come together, make agreements, and find matching funding as much as possible. The program, like I said, is really about encouraging private sector investment, making it possible for electric vehicle drivers to have access to drive whatever roadways they want. Ultimately, WashDOT wants to see charging along all of our travel corridors. And really our goal is to get more people access and more people the ability to drive electric. And so the legislature made the program permanent for the next cycle. It's changed a little bit from from the pilot, but the next cycle, which is the next 2 years, there will be about $8 million in grants awarded. So that's a big jump from 1 million to 8 million. So I think we can do a lot more. And the program's been expanded to not just include new stations in new locations, but to upgrade existing equipment. There are places that were installed in the early days that only of the 2 major standards. So stations that need an upgrade or busy locations where there's a waiting line that need additional equipment or faster charging equipment. Those are eligible projects. And then hydrogen refueling is also eligible to apply for these fundings. So the website will be updated. There's a link on this page, and so you can find that on our website. And so when we're getting ready to announce a grant opportunity, that's where it will be. If you want to get on the mailing list, you're going to want to send an email to partnerships@washdot.wa.gov, and we'll get you on the mailing list so you'll get any announcements about upcoming grant opportunities. This has not been announced yet. This is just a time to start preparing. Once it's announced, there will be 4 to 6 weeks to put your application together. So keep an eye out for that. The criteria in general is we want these as close as possible to the highway corridor. So wherever you have exits, those would be good locations so people can get off the road, charge up, get back on the road and get where they're going. Right now, it takes 30 to 45 minutes for a charge. So that's enough time to get a bite to eat, get a coffee, use the restroom. So the more that's available near that location, grocery store, restaurant, visitor center, those kind of places. It's got to be a place that there's space for it, and you need to work with your utilities to make sure that there's 3-phase power. There's got to be enough power to charge these up. And there are coming on the market some other alternatives, but in general, 3-phase power is preferred. And really, these grants that we provide the grants, and then the grantee handles everything. It's great, from finding the site, installing the equipment. We have a requirement that it needs to operate for 5 years. Operate, maintain, and report back to us on how it's going. And so there are dozens of EVSE providers, electric vehicle supply equipment providers, like EVgo and ChargePoint and Greenlots and several others. And they can pretty much do everything. So it's a matter of getting the partners together and finding an EVSE provider that you're comfortable with, and going for it. So the things that the projects must have, they must have private sector partners. Again, this whole grant program is to encourage private sector investment. It's got to be, something the EV drivers want, such as if there's no charging around, if it's a charging desert or a gap in the network somewhere. And we just updated the rules for this, and that's now in it's in the rules, and you can get a link to that from our website. So the basic equipment requirements, as I mentioned, it's got to have both of the standards. It seems like the industry is going towards SAE combo charging, But there still are thousands of people driving the Nissan Leafs and the Kia Souls and even some Mitsubishi i-MiEVs. So we want to make sure that the people that have been driving electric still have access to these. So that's a requirement to have at least one port for that. The specs in the application materials will let you know exactly the details on what's required. And then you're probably wondering now, who are we going to partner with? And so this page just lists some examples. And I think you've got some of these folks on the line. So start thinking about partners. For the ones out to the Tri-Cities, the electric utilities actually participated by waiving demand charges during the 5 years and helped with some of the siting and that counts. So even if it's public funds, that counts as matching funds. It doesn't necessarily have to be private funds, but the more you can bring to the table, the better. And the more partners, the better. That shows that there's a community commitment to it. Signage we talked about already. There are some good planning tools out there. So you don't have to start from scratch. If you've never done anything with electric vehicles, there are great tools out there now from all these wonderful resources. So you can find a guidebook for installing EV charging at a site, for example. And then here's my contact information. As I mentioned, we're getting someone hired that's going to actually manage this grant program, but this seemed like a good opportunity to help you get prepared. So the more you have done when the application is announced, then you'll be better poised for a successful application. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonya. And I see Anne had a question pop up in the chat box about whether hydrogen fueling is whether hydrogen fueling will be prioritized for funding within this, or and maybe that had really been answered sufficiently, but is that an option, or are you looking still just for electric powering for these?
It was something that the legislature added in all of the electric vehicle programs, whether it's the green transportation for transit agencies to all electric, to all the programs. So that's why we used to be called EVIP for EV charging infrastructure, but now we're ZEVIP, is to encompass all. I think the key is that when scoring the applications, so no, it's not necessarily prioritized. It's going to depend on the application and the applicant's ability to prove that it's something needed, and you know, that there are hydrogen fuel cell vehicles that will use it. So it's the applicant's job to prove that it's something that's needed. There is another grant in our office to support a hydrogen fueling and EV charging infrastructure in the Wenatchee area. And so we're already experimenting a little bit with hydrogen. And then there is a hydrogen refueling facility going in the Centralia area. So there's 2 on the horizon. I think it would be up to the applicants to prove that hydrogen should be prioritized. But as of right now, everyone's got an even shot at it.
Can I ask you a couple of quick questions? For private sector, like say somebody who, I don't want to put the Beaver grocery store, them or somebody else who chooses to participate, is there a valuation attributed to the right of way that they're contributing, the easement access, that type of thing? How does that get factored into the application?
You can factor it into your application. We've seen that where people count the leased land as a value. So if you're giving up part of your parking lot for 5+ years, you can show that as a match. So there can be in-kind match and then cash.
Okay.
So you can get creative with that.
One other quick question for you, and I know that you have to leave shortly. I notice on your map that there's a connection via I-5 to Canada, but I don't notice a connection expressed on the map between Port Angeles and Victoria. And Vancouver Island is a big market for the Olympic Peninsula. And so is there interest in Washington State of a connection with Canada there?
Sure, yes. I also wanted to point out that the ferry routes, especially the Washington State ferry routes, those are categorized as highways in the eyes of the federal government. And so those count as corridors as well. So parking near or at ferry terminals is another great option. And I know our ferry staff is very interested in putting charging at terminals for their passengers, either to charge up and drive their car on the ferry, or if they are wanting to leave their car overnight or for several days, having lower speed charging there. So coordinating with the ferries is great, and I can connect you with a person at Washington State Ferries that's exploring this.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do that, and as well the folks with the Black Ball Ferry, and just explore what that international connection can look like there.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, you're helping travelers get where they need to go, and yeah, that makes sense.
Are there any other questions for Tonya before she has to leave? And I realize we're completely blowing our agenda out of the water. We'll figure it out as we go. But before she does have to duck out, I just wanted to make sure that anybody who had questions had a chance to ask them. Well, thank you very much, Tonya. You will hear back from us and some bits and individuals or groups or whatever. And if people have follow-up questions, we can get in touch with you as well. And we will encourage everybody to sign up and try to help get the word out when the grant program is announced.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here today and for your interest in expanding the state's electric vehicle network. That's fantastic, and I hope you guys, I won't be on the evaluation committee, but I hope that you send in a strong proposal. And like I said, that the ZEVIP is one of many potential upcoming funding sources. So no matter what, I think having a plan in place is a smart move. Thank you, bye.
Thank you, bye-bye. So up next is Mike, and Mike's going to talk with us about location, siting decisions, and what is important to go into packages. And I'm mindful that we are, again, we're figuring this out as we go. We're way off of our agenda, but Mike, I'm wondering if we can incorporate a little bit more dynamic Q&A with you and ideas, so that if people you know, if what you talk about triggers some thoughts about projects that they've got in mind, that we can get a little bit of interaction going. That work for you?
Sure. Yeah. So, she's gone, but when we speak to her again, we should thank her. I think that was a really great overview. And, keep in mind, this is a pre-launch, really. They haven't yet, they've kind of figured it out, but WashDOT still has to hire staff. And so the timing for this is great. You really want to get in underneath before the decisions have been made. And I think that this is a great corridor. And I think what you've done there by bringing this group together looks great in WashDOT's eyes. What they're looking for, obviously, is a partnership, and to the more inclusive, the better. And this is a huge start. What Tony talked about in her slide 23, and I can bring that up if you'd like. She addressed a lot of the key criteria, and so why don't I share my screen and I can show you that slide, because I copied that. Is that visible? I'll make it a little bigger. I just made a snip of it because I thought it would be good to use for reference. So there we go. So basically, the state has identified the key corridors where the kinds of activities that they want to see chargers need to be identified. And when I was first going through the ZEVP's website and I saw that Highway 101 was on just as I was starting to work for this project, I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity. It looks like the prioritization by the University of Washington, they've developed this great tool that we've been working with as well on other projects called Charge Eval, and it looks at the kind of travel behavior that's really important to consider. And so that's looking at the southern and the eastern side or eastern sides of the I guess it's sort of a rectangle, the Highway 101 loop. But it looks like, I think, given the fact that you've applied already for a couple of applications and it's been specifically identified for this, I think that, and you've got a great partnership, I would say that makes this group, I would say, very competitive. Plus, you're probably the first group that's actually starting to look at this. So that's a great position to be in. She mentioned that the distance between stations needs to be at least every 40 to 50 miles. The reason for that is the oldest EVs, that's about their range. So, we're talking the original Nissan Leaf, for example, and some of the other EVs, the BMW i3s, the battery degrades over time. So you need to get at least that kind of range. And then she identified a number of siting criteria. For Highway 101, I don't think there's too many actual interchanges. It's pretty direct access. So you want to basically have convenience. Convenience is really important. EV drivers don't want to go out of their way to find a charger. Half mile is a long distance, but if you're on I-5 or something, that's pretty much the length of a lot of the off ramps. But for Highway 101, that won't be an issue. So you want to have, she didn't mention it, but really good visibility is important. So if you look at, for example, where Tesla sites its superchargers, they want to actually have the actual chargers, and Tesla has very visibly dominant chargers. EVgo, likewise, Tesla that are bright red, EVgo are sort of a high visibility green. Electrify America, likewise. You want to have them visible, so that's really important. And if you can locate them in a place that a driver's going to see, even though you're going to see it on your dashboard or on your PlugShare app, visibility is really important. So that ties into the convenience. So visually convenient as well as physically convenient to drive to. Safe. There's some design considerations that go into that. For example, you want to have good lighting, and ideally, if you can have weather protection. I think, especially in parts of the Olympic Peninsula where you have a lot of rain, they get forks. You want to be out of the rain while you're plugging into charge. And then she mentioned some of the sort of amenity factors. I like to, most EVs today have about a 200 to 250 mile range, and I would say going forward that range will probably increase a little bit, maybe even a lot, depending on battery technology development. But right now, if you think if your vehicle goes about 200 miles, that means that's about 3 to 4 hours, depending on the speeds that you're driving. So I like to joke that EVs have the same appetite that humans have. So you're going to want to eat while your vehicle is eating. You're going to be getting your food when the vehicle's getting its charge. So food is really important. So I think restaurants of various types or co-locating at restaurants, even if it's fast food, makes a lot of sense. So you use the restroom, your vehicle needs to get its nutrition, and you need to get your nutrition about at the same frequency. So that certainly makes sense from an amenity. And she mentioned also restrooms and drinking water. Let's see, parking spaces. So you need enough space. One concern is that by locating charging infrastructure, you need to have physical space both for the vehicles to be parking at while charging, as well as for the infrastructure itself. And depending on the size of the station, that is the number of charging ports, that'll determine the number of the physical footprint of the charging infrastructure. And if you have, say, a big facility with more than, say, 4 stations, you're going to need to have adequate space for a transformer and the switch gear and all that kind of thing. And that takes physical space. So from a design consideration, that's really important to make sure you have enough physical space or a place to put it. You don't actually have to have the infrastructure immediately adjacent. You can run you can trench and run it underneath a parking lot or through a planting strip to accommodate that. But the farther that the infrastructure is from the actual charger, the more costly it becomes. So there's some trade-offs that need to be considered in the design. She mentioned the need for power. Obviously, you need to have power. The greater the electrical demand, the more power you need. And so that's a consideration. And that's something that typically you need to work through with the local utility. Most of the time, most facilities were not sized to facilitate a DC fast charger. And DC fast chargers are typically 50 kilowatt and more. And on another slide, she pointed, she wants to have, or the program needs to have, be ready to add larger facilities. I think she listed 150 kW. And a lot of the newer chargers like Electrify America, EVgo, and Tesla in particular, they go all the way up to 250. In Europe, they're getting up to 350. So the new high voltage EV architecture will facilitate much faster charging, but of course that requires even more power. And then I think that's basically it. I think a key part is going to be finding private sector partners who recognize that will get direct economic benefit from hosting chargers. So clearly restaurant, retail, recreational activities, those are the kind of things that will, if you have a charger there, it's an amenity that will bring customers to your business. And so there's a direct, it's an amenity that brings people. If you have a captive audience, they're going to be charging for 20 to maybe 20 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on the size of the battery and the speed of the charging. That can be a real important draw for customers.
I have a question. I think it might be for the group, but Mike, maybe when I see that 480 volt 3-phase electric power supply, I have zero context for that. Is that fairly standard? Is that should we expect to have that around the corridor, or is that and something that is a more specialized? Not everybody will have access to this if they're on the 101 corridor.
That's a great question. That is sort of commercial, so as opposed to say residential. So obviously for an apartment building or whatever, a private home, and certainly you wouldn't have that. But for institutional facilities where you have a large kinds of loads, the transformer would have that. But it may not have capacity. So you might be sized for that, but the transformer itself may not be large enough to facilitate additional charging capacity. And so one of the key opportunities, I believe, for utilities a lot of utilities, in fact, I think they're required in the state of Washington to have transportation electrification plans. And they're all exploring ways to determine what that actually means. In fact, I'm meeting this afternoon with Seattle City Light to help answer that question for fleets, specifically for the kinds of fleets that are trying to electrify. What is it that fleets need? For this kind of charging, sites need to have adequate infrastructure. So if you're going to put more than one charger, more than likely, I would say you're going to need to have additional capacity, meaning a larger electrical service. So even if you have, a 483 phase today to meet the needs of future electrical vehicle charging demand, that would likely need to be upsized. And that's an area where partnership with utilities is going to be really important.
And those costs are eligible for grant funding to increase the size of the transformer. Is that something that is an eligible cost, or is the cost of doing that like an eligible match component?
That's a really good question, and I think that we should write that down. This is the first time I've seen Tonia's slides, and so this is as much of a new information for me on the ZEVIP program as it is for everybody else on today's call. But typically the biggest cost component of these types of projects is the make-ready infrastructure. That is the infrastructure upstream of the actual chargers themselves. So, if you think about it, a DC fast charger starts at about $30,000. They can, depending on the features and the size, they can go considerably more than that. But, the purchase cost is about $30,000 for the most part. They, like I said, they can be far more. But depending on what's there at the site, the actual installation costs can be multiples of that.
Do you know of companies that are interested, service providers, EVSEs that are interested in doing business on the Olympic Peninsula or the Kitsap Peninsula, either one, that maybe, and if I had done this differently, I should have reached out to them and invited them to participate today. But who are these companies? Are they already established? And I guess that's a question to the whole group as well, is do you have the contacts that you need to have with the service providers who would run these charging stations, install them and all that? I don't know what the state of the industry is.
Well, I'll just say that I've spoken, for example, with ChargePoint, and DKS is we're vendor agnostic with regard to charging, both charging networks and charging providers. So there's the charging manufacturers who build the chargers, and then there's the charging networks who kind of operate them. ChargePoint's an example of a combination of the two, because they also build their own chargers. But all of them are, many of them are very interested in getting involved because they're trying to expand their business. And so I know specifically that ChargePoint's one of them. There's probably quite a few others as well. But I think what Tonya is really looking for is going to be from the site host and the type of businesses, as well as from the utilities. And I know there's quite a few folks from the PUD on today's call, and I think that would be interesting to hear what they have to say on that topic.
And Zana, I see you have some comments popping up in the chat box. You have experience with this program, the last incarnation of this program. Do you want to share a little bit about what you learned in working with those private service providers and what you're thinking about this time around as far as that goes?
We applied in the last round. We partnered with Pacific County and did an application. So we were really just looking to get a charger at the Elma location, because it's basically kind of at a junction of, it is at a junction of two different highways, and would eventually help with what is connecting, 101 to I-5. But yeah, unfortunately for us, we don't have anybody from our PUD on right now, but we didn't have a ton of success with working with our PUD. I know other people in the peninsula have had better success. And currently we've just had a big changeover at our PUD, so it'll be interesting to see what that new relationship will entail. But the private, you know, the EV charge providers, you do need to make contact with those. ChargePoint, as Mike said, is one of the bigger providers. Trying to bring in providers that aren't in our area does not seem, you know, very fruitful. They're definitely interested in giving you the information, because you do need to talk to them about getting cost estimates to put into your grant proposal. So that's the main thing they've provided. From my understanding, I don't remember them providing anything for free. I don't think that they really have much capability to do that. You know, they are a for-profit entities. So, you know, they're there to give you the information. They definitely, you know, they would like to see that loop get built out for the money-making potential of, you know, when charging becomes profitable, which charging is still not a very profitable business. So it's a double-edged sword. You know, like Mike was saying, the other thing that I put in there as a comment is the power is one of the bigger issues. If you can get your PUD to work with you, that's huge, because fast charging takes power that people just don't understand how much power it is and the cost to get it where you need to get it to. We were trying to work with our local entities. If you can work with your local PUDs and find out where the closest points are for those high power locations that are also going to be in the right location with a public provider, like a restaurant, you know, whatever, that's close to, that fits all basically the other criteria for the grant application, that is going to give you the best application that I could, you know, come up with. Unfortunately, I would say in the past rounds, we've had some really big private hitters come in that really kept those funds on the I-5 corridor. So I think that's been one of the biggest, you know, we just can't compete so far, has been the hardest part. We're not getting the points, you know, that we need, because they were able to get basically like 50-50 match on the I-5 corridor. I haven't seen any grant applications off the I-5 corridor that have been able to get that amount of public contribute or private contribution. So if people have the ability to do that, even if it's in land match or whatnot, then that's great. And also just really trying to find private entities that find the value, because that's been the other thing. Restaurants and, you know, your local entities, it's the contract of 5 years is, and the reporting and stuff seems onerous on them. So trying to figure out a way to maybe do that for them would be something I might suggest. But it's definitely a challenge for us out here. Like the people you'd want to partner with, like our local tribes, they've kind of usually taken their own initiative and are putting in their own charging stations. So, you know, they're not as interested in partnering, but usually, but if you can find some bigger entities within the Peninsula corridor, I think that would definitely help. And one other thing that I just want to throw out there, I know that I think it was Mike, I'd love to hear more about how they're getting the funding for the charging stations that are going into the parks, because I've noticed in our Peninsula corridor, those are the largest percentage of new charging stations I am seeing. So, and I wasn't aware of how those funds were being distributed or how they're applying. I know we have 3 in our county at state parks now. So, and also I was going to say, Tonia said she was going to look into the Electrify America. We actually did just get a Electrify America charging station at our local Walmart. I don't even know if it's completely open, but the station's in. So And that's all I have.
Anne, I see you've got, you're thanking her, or do you have your hand up? You're thanking her on that great summary. Mike, do you have any insights on these state park stations that are going in, and how that fits in with a coordinated regional approach? If is that something we should be looking at as well as far as other opportunities to collaborate?
Well, not just the state parks, but also the national parks. I mean, you know, the Olympic National Park within the area, and I would imagine that, you know, especially with the current administration's pledge to add 500,000 new chargers, state parks, national parks might be a logical place for adding that. Certainly, it makes a lot of sense. So I would, you know, I think that in terms of the list of outreach, it seems like we should have a list of additional contacts, one of which would be state parks, or, you know, the State Parks Commission. I've worked in the past on other projects with the State Parks Commission on collaboration, and I found them very easy to work with. I haven't worked with the national parks, but I would hope that, especially in the current administration, that would be easier. And these are major destinations. It's one of the reasons that Olympic Peninsula is on sort of the national tourist map. I mean, I think the ZEVP program, if you look at the language, it seems to prioritize tourism and recreation and economic development associated with that. So that they would be key partners. And again, you know, the tribes seem really important.
I see, I'm just looking at the chat. Angela had a question about the Thurston and Kitsap area. If anybody's working with PSC, which would be the utility provider, I think, for that area. Has anybody waded into that yet, or are there other utilities that you're working with? I'm thinking in the Kitsap Peninsula, you all are scoping, sounds like scoping some different ideas there.
I'll just say that PSC is one of the more active utilities in the transportation electrification space. They have a program called Up and Go Electric, which focuses on a number of different types of markets, specifically residential and fleet. But I have not seen anything in Up and Go Electric focusing on opportunity charging, which is really where this would fit. So that would be a good question. I have contacts at PSE, and I'd be happy to reach out to them. But you know, again, this is a little different, but they may be interested.
I'm kind of curious. We have Matthias with Clallam County and Will and Kevin with Jefferson County PUDs. What is the PUD perspective on this? What are how are you all thinking about this, and how can the other partners collaborate with you easier, better? What should we be thinking about?
We've been waiting for this grant for some time. And as such, we've been working with Energy Northwest, who was also partnering with some of the EV charging that went in Eastern Washington, the Evita project there. And they had sort of been working on putting together a collaborative for this specific one-on-one corridor, sort of help tie the different entities together. Then they would be the service provider to operate those charging stations. And through that, we've identified a number of locations that are close to three-phase power, so we could install that. It's a little challenging between Port Angeles and Forks, just because it's a long stretch of road, and we just sort of have the power there, and there's not a lot of businesses, but hopefully that the new grocer there in Beaver might be a good opportunity. I would have to check with engineers though about the power situation there specifically. But following this, I'll be reaching back out to Energy Northwest to see if we can puzzle that together and see if they still are interested. And I'm assuming that's what you were talking about too, Will, when you said that you'd applied for a grant in the past.
Yep, that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm maybe you guys can help with this grant. You know, we've prepped a lot of sites actually where we prepared to prepared the infrastructure to put in three-phase charging, but it's mostly been public partnerships on public sites. So with this grant needing that strong private partnership, that would be the biggest challenge for us, is identifying the private partner and trying to get that match high enough. And in some ways, like the Kitsap being able to have the PUD and PSE working together, that sounds like a strong partnership. It'll be interesting to see where we can find a private partner that's got enough resources to put in.
Others on the call, on the meeting, what do you think about that? Do you have other contacts? I feel like as somebody from the least involved with this, just dialing into this right now, I know enough to know that there have been a lot of different coordination efforts over the years and sort of partnerships. What are some thoughts that are coming to your minds right now as you hear about the program that's coming up? What the PUDs have done, what they're sort of, I'm going to say, ready to do or looking to do. What are your thoughts about how do we bring more private partners in, or opportunities that are presenting themselves that look good maybe for this go round, or something that maybe this isn't the right grant program for some of this stuff. I don't really know, but I'm kind of curious what some of the rest of you are thinking about the ideas that you've been mulling.
This is Mike Doherty. So I think it'd be important for maybe the PUDs to investigate the the BMW money, I believe, came to the park for the level 2 sites at Lake Crescent and the hot springs, Salduck Hot Springs. I think there's one other site, and then the Department of Interior would be the concession granting authority there. And then down at Lake Quinault, I think it's Aramark again, a national corporation, put in the charger, but the Forest Service would be under the Department of Agriculture. So they would grant the concession or license amendments to site it on the federally owned lodges. But that could be a private funding match possibly, since it came from BMW and some Aramark right away and installation cost. Another one might be the dealerships. There's one dealership on the north end of the peninsula, Dan Wilder. He's very interested in promoting EVs, of course, and I plan to get back to him soon about what we learned today. But there's a very similar dealership in the harbors, I understand it, a larger family operation with most of the EV models centered at that dealership. So if those two dealerships got together and wanted to help promote EV tourism, secondly, the electrification of local government fleets, eventually more state and federal facility fleets on the Olympic Peninsula, it would be in their own self-interest, of course, to be maintaining some of those electric vehicles at those two large dealerships. So they should have some interest. And then lastly, probably state parks along with national park, because they have some larger facilities that probably close to 101 that could have transformers to handle the large power load, and a couple like Squim Bay, for instance, that are open, you know, year-round, 24 hours with a ranger close by for security. Those sort of sites may be susceptible to being self-sustaining if they charged a little bit for the charger. I guess one last thought, there's still Volkswagen settlement money outstanding. So if this new program were to approach Volkswagen and say, hey, we'd like a little bigger piece of your pie, knowing there's millions and millions still left in the settlement, they could have, you know, some greenwashing effect for their own brands by participating in this partnership. And that would be more private money to help build out the whole loop idea.
Mike Busen, I have a question for you. Because as somebody who's written a bunch of grants and is all keen on putting together the most competitive package possible, one of the things that struck me was the need to demonstrate demand. And when she showed that screen of the charge eval outputs, I was discouraged, I'll just say. You know, like, can the Olympic Peninsula and Kitsap Peninsulas, can they compete with the demand for EV infrastructure that charge eval shows in Eastern Washington and in more urban places? How do we, what do we make of that charge eval assessment of you know, especially I'm thinking of the Olympic Peninsula with such rural areas? How do we overcome that, or how do we harness that, if maybe another way of saying it?
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, I share your concern on that, but I have a thought on that. But before I get into that, I just want to make one response to Mike's comment, and that is about the VW settlement. And it's, by the way, it's VW, not BMW. And so Electrify America is the program, is the company that was created, funded through the VW Dieselgate settlement. And I do have contacts at Electrify America, and I'm more than happy to facilitate discussions directly with Electrify America. They've not always, they used to be harder to work with, but having a local contact really helps. So to answer your question, Tara, I believe that WashDOT really wants to make the charging distributed, the chargers distributed statewide. And so while the total volume of demand might be greater on the high volume corridors, like, you know, like I-90 and I-5, those are already served. So remember, there's quite a few chargers along those corridors. Those were the first part of the West Coast Electric Highway. So I believe that, you know, this is now the third funding round for the state. So, you know, they may be, you know, and they've clearly specifically identified 101. So I believe that they are trying to expand beyond just the heavy use corridors. And I think the way to make it attractive is to meet the scoring criteria of the grants. And those haven't been announced yet. But what I think we heard loud from Tonya is partnerships. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think two things. One is broad support from partnerships, stakeholder commitment. And the second is a 50% plus match. And I think if those two criteria can be met, and those are not easy, but if they can, I think that could make applications from anywhere along the 101 corridor attractive. And again, looking at the charge eval map, those were on the south and the eastern sides of the polygon.
Would that same thinking, looking at that I-5 corridor, obviously one way to get to the 101 corridor is from the south through Olympia, that connection there. But as the Kitsap folks are looking at how to expand charging infrastructure on the Kitsap Peninsula, it seems that that connection between the Olympic Peninsula and that whole Seattle I-5 area is also, and maybe is that, it just seems like there's an important opportunity there that we don't want to lose, that that is, you know, that sort of straight shot between that major metro area that's, you know, buying so many vehicles, and the economies, the communities, the resources that are out on the peninsulas. That could be an advantage too, as they're thinking about their proposals, how to frame that. Okay. What kind of thoughts are bubbling up for others of you who've been on here about challenges that we're looking at, what information gaps we might be missing, people maybe who need to be at the table who aren't there? Laura, seeing you pop up, you've got some thoughts there, please.
Thank you. I was just thinking about the location of Port Townsend. We're not right on the 101 corridor. And so I'm wondering about, you know, whether this is a appropriate grant program for us to look further at. I mean, we are a destination, you know, that people would use the 101 corridor to get to Port Townsend perhaps, but I don't know how much that would work against us in what seems to be a fairly competitive grant. So that's one thing I was thinking about. other thing I was thinking about with the public or with the private partnerships, like how that would play out, you know, like, so we have like a park and ride, you know, place here, you know, which seems, you know, like a good place for a EV charging station, you know, people can park there and then take the bus into town. But, you know, what private, you know, entity would want to participate in that? There's a Safeway kind of nearby, but it wouldn't, you know, the EV charging station wouldn't be on their property per se, you know. Or like visitor center, we've collaborated already with, you know, Will and Kevin from our PUD to, you know, we're all poised to go with 2 EV charging station, you know, potential locations at the visitor center, but again, there's no private, you know, partnership to go with that unless you were able to like gather up all those small businesses around and like, you know, somehow get them all to buy into supporting it. But that seems challenging too, you know. Yeah, so those are my thoughts. Not to be like negative, but I just, you know, I really want to do all we can to get Port Townsend to be involved, but I don't know if we need to look further.
Well, one thought is what Tony mentioned was the ferry terminal. So it seems like the ferry terminal would be a logical one because that is, you know, making those connections, those through connections, is going to be really important. While you're waiting for the ferry, you could be charging.
Yes, in Port Townsend, we don't have a parking lot for our ferry terminal. So I don't, yes, I like the idea of that. I don't know how that would work in our particular case. And again, the private partnership with that, you know, is just a question mark. But yes, I agree that has some potential there.
I wonder, Laura, loving Port Townsend the way I do, and also knowing that connection up to Whidbey Island and that whole SR20 parallel to I-5, the significance of that. And she did make a big point about the ferries. I wonder if this is the kind of thing, maybe this isn't the right program, or this isn't the right program this year. I don't know, but maybe there's an opportunity. You have such a vibrant downtown district and an uptown district that maybe it's more of the public-private partnership comes through more of a district area collaboration between whatever your downtown association is and the project partnership. And I don't know how that could play out, but I appreciate, and something that Xana said struck me, that there's a reporting requirement of the private sector participants. And so minimizing that, you know, instead of having 10 different businesses having to wait, you know, maybe there's, you know, just a single point of reporting there.
We do have a Port
been
Townsend
discussed.
Main Street group. Yeah.
You know, is that something that's come up as an interest, you know, with your business community, like a downtown association sort of a group?
Well, we have Port Townsend Main Street, which is a group that is kind of like an umbrella, you know, for all the downtown businesses. And we partnered with them when we did a whole reconstruction of our downtown historic district, you know, really putting in new streets basically. And the PD came and undergrounded all the overhead wires, which was awesome. And yeah, so there is something like that. That's a good point. I like thinking about that. Thank you.
How about other questions, concerns, information needs that you all might have come into this meeting with, or questions that have arisen just based on what you've heard so far? Anything?
I guess another question I would have is, can someone make a connection with Tesla to have us all better understand how a Tesla Nest nurtures just the Tesla Club, I think it is. And is there a way you could co-locate general chargers at those sites, since the two I understand are at commercial sites? One's east of Sequim at Holiday Inn, and I think there's one at Claylock. So it would provide both general charging, since they have the power, obviously, and Tesla. And then just another point for the other Mike, there was BMW money involved in the sites at Lake Crescent, separate from the VW money. And the park superintendent had to grant a special change in the concessionaire license at both Lake Quinault and Lake Crescent and the Hot Springs. Just so you know, that took a little extra length of time to negotiate the change in language for the concessionaires. And I suspect that might occur at a couple of other sites around the perimeter of Olympic National Park and Olympic National Forest. One other point is, as I recall, the Makah Nation had a donation of 6 chargers probably 7 or 8 years ago now. So whatever the source of that was, that might be another viable competitor, provider. I don't know what that was. There was a business manager, Mike Rainey, at the time, and he arranged that donation. So I think he's retired now, but somebody at the tribe must recall, maybe the general manager's office, who donated those 6 chargers. Thanks.
I'm going to call on Xana in just a second, but Trish DePoe from the Makah Nation is on. And Trish, I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if you're familiar. I know you were working on different things back then. I don't know if you're familiar with those chargers or the source of that, but the Makah Nation is, you know, has some great experience. Are you, anything you want to share on that, or do you know anything? I will say that if you are speaking, it's not coming through. This is why we need universal broadband access, everybody. So please keep this in mind too, as we think about EV infrastructure. It's really hard for them to connect from way out there. Trish, I'll follow up with you offline if you have any insights on that, if you can hear me. Xana, do you have, you had popped up there, what you got going? What are you thinking?
I was just gonna say, from my understanding, we did work with the city of Aberdeen to put in their Tesla bank, just looking over their contract and working with Tesla. And so we actually had them ask specifically to put in some extra infrastructure for future charging stations that were not Tesla stations. So we will be talking with them to see if this is a possibility to get, you know, regular charging stations on that lot, as well as the Tesla charging stations. I do not believe that infrastructure is just automatically there for other Tesla charging stations. I'm pretty positive we had to talk with them on that. And then a second note that I was going to bring up was, I believe it was Matthias was talking about the Energy Northwest and Avita, and we had met with them as well. I want to say just prior to COVID, when we thought that a EV grant was coming out and they were going to head that grant. And that seemed very promising. I don't know if Matthias or anybody knows if that's a possibility to work with them again, if they're still interested, because they definitely have, you know, the resources and the capability to really, you know, manage the project much better than any of us private entities would, or public entities would. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Anna. Any thoughts on that, Matthias?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for them, but we are a member of Energy Northwest, so you know, I'm quite confident that they'll be interested in, and they will definitely take a serious look at this.
Can I ask this group something that had not really registered with me? And again, I know less about this than any of you, so this may be a dumb question, but it seems like with the many different funding opportunities out there, not just the ZEVIP, which is right in front of us, would you all find value in sort of an ongoing just update, like, you know, I could let everybody know when there's new funding programs coming out, if there was an interest in cross collaboration, convening periodically to see who's doing what and looking for partnerships? Or is this the kind of a thing that's best sort of done at the ground level in all of the different ways that you were doing this? I'm looking for what we might be able to provide in the way of support from PRTPO to advance the EV readiness of the Olympic and Kitsap Peninsulas, and wondering if there's any sort of ongoing sort of communications or coordination that would be of value to you. And if not, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure, and ask the question while you all are here. Well, I'm going to take that no response at all to be, we'll see. So
as just one citizen, I value this communication. If it was once a month or something optional to tune in, just to kind of communicate with you, to Tanya and others, I find it very valuable. And just the ideas coming from around the peninsula, it needs to be a community of interest in this grant at some time, and this could be the foundation of people trusting other people about what they're saying. One aside also from, I guess, Mike, in Port Townsend, as I recall, the fellow that owns Power Trip donated 6 level 2 chargers around Port Townsend. So there was another private enterprise donation into this system. So it might be something else that would help account for a local private match when writing the grant. Andy Cochran is the name I was searching for. So Andy is one of the 2 owners and the guy that would be best contact. Will O'Donnell, I'm sure, knows Andy, so it could be something that might interest him. Secondly, in Tanya's presentation, she had that kind of primitive looking lean-to as an early days charging site. Well, in the rainforest on the Olympic Peninsula west side, that might be a facility that might interest somebody like Andy to be a partner. So the major solar installers may be interested in contributing this project if they could have a solar facility on top of something that protects the clients with the cars during the period while they're reading a paperback before they head up to Claylock or wherever. So it could be the installers may donate a little bit, may actually benefit from some installs publicly. It may be an interesting twist, particularly in the adverse weather of winter.
Thank you for sharing that information. I really appreciate it. Laura with City of Port Townsend.
I'll let you all know that Peninsula RTPO has a website, prtpo.org, and we're building on the resources page. We're building sort of an electric vehicle resources working page. It's very much a work in progress. When I send out a recap, and share your contact with the information with each other and all after this meeting, I'll provide you a link to that. And we are, it's sort of being built from the ground up by what's contributed from the different people who use it and have responded to our request for information. So when you see it, if you, when you get that email from me after this, if you would take a look, if you have time, take a look at that EV resources page. And if you know of plans, policies out there, examples that others in the region could benefit from, or knowing that this work is underway somewhere else so that we can either learn from it as best practices for another project, or maybe piggyback onto it to make more of a coordinated proposal or strategy, please take a look at that. And if you have ideas for other materials, let me know and I'll get those posted up there. We also have links there to the funding sources that we know of, but this ZEVIP one is the first one that we know of that's going to become available. So I'm I just want to open it up. We've just got, 5-10 minutes left. Any thoughts from people who've been on the call? Ideas for next steps? Anything like that that you would want to share with the group?
I have one suggestion. This is Mike Doherty again. There is an Olympic Peninsula Tourism Council that holds a meeting once a month. They rotate it around the peninsula. And if yourself, Tanya, maybe could attend that meeting and be a speaker, a presenter about the potential of this grant, try to generate some private hotelier, motel people to be supportive. I think that would help get the attention of the grant providers. And I think Ann Soul and I have talked about this as really a need to get some of the smaller operations more sympathetic with electrification of the tourist vehicles. The membership includes folks in Grays Harbor, the Lake Quinault innkeepers, people in Mason County. I suspect, I just don't know this, but I suspect the tribes operate somewhat on their own, but some do send representatives to the area tourism groups. So I think that would be a good longer range goal if you could get on the road to that luncheon. Thanks.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
I think that's a really good point, because it occurs to me that this is Ann with SQUIM, that we're talking about tourist drivers. We're not, local folks don't use fast chargers frequently for their personal car charging because it wears down the battery. So yeah, the tourism would be a good source. I mean, just to get the support and the partnerships at minimum, if not having them help generate the ideas for the private partnership. That's my big concern. 3 or 4 years ago, when the North Olympic Development Council put together an application that involved about 12 partners, I think we were using EVgo as our vendor, as our, who would own the stations and collect the money. I don't know if we could get them now. From what Zana was talking about, it sounds like they, these companies may not be that interested in our relatively low demand out here. So I think that could be a challenge. I'm just wanting to put that out there. And I do have that experience dealing with that grant application. So if anybody wants more information on that, I'm available.
I just want to follow up with that. Thank you for the suggestion. Yes, you're right about the DC fast chargers are primarily for tourists or, any long distance trips. It may not be tourism. People may be out there for other reasons, but, and then as far as EVgo, I also have contacts with EVgo. I know they're interested in the ZEVP because we've had these discussions. I don't know if they are interested in this particular corridor, but I'd be more than happy to ask that question.
Mike, would somebody like an EVgo or any of these vendors, do they ever pop into a meeting like this and just talk about what they do, what they're looking for in terms of business opportunities, that type of information exchange without committing to anything, but just to hear from the locals and let the locals hear from them?
It depends on the organization. EVgo tends to be very understaffed. They're growing fast. They're very lean as an organization. So I don't know if they would have the capabilities or not. They might. I certainly, the ones that are more trying to build their business, like, ChargePoint or Flow or SemiConnect, they probably would be much more interested in it because they're in sales mode all the time.
Yeah. Would that be helpful to you all as a group to hear from? I'm vendor agnostic, but I'm just trying to get information for people. Would that be useful to you all if there was an opportunity to hear what this looks like from that vendor side of things, what these opportunities look like, what they're looking for that makes them willing to come to the table. Would that be of interest to people?
I think that would be really useful.
We could see about what we could line up, and again, I've got to think about how we do it in such a way that doesn't taint the waters, if you know what I mean, in terms of how we present it. I don't want to skew any, procurement processes or anything like that by who we ask and how we ask, but it seems like that's a perspective that would be really, it's sort of missing here. We're talking about what we need as communities and businesses, but we're not hearing from the folks who have to be at the table to have a proposal.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for this grant or future opportunities, and or just at the minimum a contact list of not their website, but if actually someone you could talk to would be great. But I don't know if there's an inventory of fast chargers currently, non-Tesla fast chargers in the PER TPO area. That would also be interesting. I know there's a Blink one in Silverdale. I don't know what the one in Port Angeles is. It's weird and I couldn't connect to it. And there's not a lot more.
Well, I don't know about that, but I know somebody who does. So we will see if we can find that information and make that accessible to you all as well. So
it should be available on PlugShare.
On PlugShare? Okay, good. And I just made a note about that, and I will provide a link to that from our resources page, because I don't think I have that up.
And also the AD Alternative Fuels Data Center, the AFDC.
And Mike, is it conceivable? What is the best way for people to find contacts within these companies without trying to go in through a corporate website and hit or miss until you get there? How do they go about starting to build these relationships and make these contacts?
Well, I can share a list with you if you'd like.
I think that would be great if you could do that. And we'll certainly try to keep you in that loop. And I'm not going to be making any contacts, I don't think, but it's that would be great. I can't imagine for you all trying to think as you put a project proposal together, how you figure out who you're supposed to be reaching out to and coordinating with. Well, we are definitely, we're coming up on noon. We completely blew the agenda out, so I apologize for putting together something that didn't really quite play out. Are there any comments or questions or anything that you didn't have a chance to bring up that we might be able to address and get back to you on? And if you don't have it today, you've got my contact, but I'm just kind of curious if there's anything that you might want to put out there still.
I just add that I think we should all recognize that I think in the big world of EVs, Washington has kind of an unusual reputation with Inslee, the action plan, the legislature providing money for greenhouse gas inventories, all that sort of climate stuff. So the vendors may think, gee, this might be a lucrative area for them to renew their interest from the past just because of the political atmosphere here. So I wouldn't be shy with this project, both in asking and then hoping for some outside interests to help out.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Washington is, I think, the #2 EV market right now in the United States after California. We're distant behind California, but there's a lot happening. I mean, we're catching up quickly. For example, we now have a clean fuel standard that passed. So there's a lot that's going on here, and the electromobility industry is very much aware of this. I was talking to one of ChargePoint's competitors yesterday called Flow. They're based in Canada, and they're very, you know, they're pursuing all kinds of work down here. And so there's a lot of interest in the state of Washington.
Well, I want to thank you, Mike, and Tonya. I'll be circling back with her again for sharing your insights, for helping us to sort of think through as a region how, you know, what the opportunities are in front of us. I think ZEVIP is an opportunity, a good one. I think it's, you know, it's a stretch in some regards, but it's not a moonshot. So, you know, it's and we've got, you know, some time before that comes together for people to think about what they heard today, and the other interests at the table that are looking for the same thing. I will follow up with this after this meeting. I will let you all give you the contact information for the folks who are on here, and just a real quick summary of notes. I know that I'm terrible at trying to monitor everything. I think the chat box might be overflowing. Apologies for not being able to monitor that as well. But if there are any questions in there that didn't get answered, we'll try to get those answered and get that back out to everybody. And I don't want to promise and say like, oh, in 2 months or something, expect to have another meeting, but we will look for an opportunity in the future to bring anybody who's interested back together and see whether it's the ZEVIP proposal or some other funding opportunities, where people are at, and see what we can do to help catalyze some funding opportunities. And I'll just say also, in the meantime, if you have any questions, want any other information, want to be more dialed into what PRTPO is doing, you'll have my contact information. So use it, stay in touch. And I think with that, unless anybody has anything else to share, I think we can say that we're done today. Thank you very much.